Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Ian said, I'm Martin Whitworth. I'm Head of Data Mapping, Modelling and Information at the Environment Agency. And this morning I would like to cover a couple of topics which are related to spatial data infrastructure. I'm going to give you a few examples of how the Environment Agency has benefited from recent developments in how we approach data management and the technology that goes with it. First, a little bit of a background to the Environment Agency. It is the environmental regulator in England and Wales. It has sister organisations in Northern Ireland and Scotland. We are responsible for managing the risk of flooding. We have to protect homes and people, and to do that we work in partnership with a lot of other organisations, and you've already heard from the LGA today. Local authorities are one group of organisations we work in partnership with. We're also responsible for managing the environment and issuing permits for waste, industrial sources, radioactivity, etc. And again, we work in partnership with local authorities, Natural England, Association of River Trusts, etc. We have around 12,000 staff. They're spread across the whole of England and Wales. They all rely on data and information to do their jobs. Without data and information, without spatial data infrastructures, they can't do their work. I've got a couple of examples of how we have used recent developments to help us become a much more efficient organisation whilst offering a much better customer service. First example is assessing the risk to, in this case, the salmon resources, i.e. salmon, in our rivers, and that is a risk from siltation. Salmon do not like particularly silty water, so they won't go anywhere near it. That can be a barrier to fish migration around our rivers, and salmon are often seen as an indicator of good environmental quality. So we've used spatial data infrastructure and our GIS systems in order to create a risk map for the whole of England and Wales that allows us to target where we send our environmental protection officers to do local surveys to work out just where the sediment is coming from that's stopping salmon migrating. It means that our officers don't have to go and walk every single metre of riverbank and work out what's going on. They can use GIS and spatial data infrastructure to target their interventions. So hopefully we will have a much bigger impact on the environment by using these systems compared to just using local knowledge on its own. Another example from the fisheries side is looking at fish pass prioritization. We know that there are around 26,000 barriers to fish migration in the rivers in England and Wales. There is no way that we can assess whether it is worth putting in a fish pass at every single one of those by just working things out manually. So we've used spatial data and our GIS to whittle down, to reduce the number of places that number of barriers that we look at, so that we can work out roughly where the biggest impact is going to be of putting fish passes in. Fish passes are very expensive things to put in, and so we need to make sure that where we do put them in, they really will increase the quality of the environment. So that's about the environment itself. But of course, we have to, in these economic times, or in fact in any economic times, we really must operate efficiently as a business. We have something like 20,000 applications a year for permits across England and Wales for a variety of pieces of environmental legislation. Could be for a landfill site, it could be for abstraction of water, it could be for the issuing of a permit to store radioactive materials. So a very wide range of legislation, a large number of people involved in it, and we have decided, or we have developed a tool which uses large spatial data infrastructures combined with our knowledge of geographic information systems to allow us very quickly to work out what is of most concern in any given geographic location. So 20,000 permits a year used to take us, let's say, approximately a day to work out which pieces of legislation applied, how we had to take into account, for example, sites of special scientific interest, special areas of conservation. Now, with our national, with a tool that we call EasyMap, the national permitting team, we've got those assessments down to about half an hour per permit. As I'm sure you'll realise, 7.5 hours down to half an hour, that is a massive saving for us as an agency. So there's a big cost saving. It also means that we turn around our permits more quickly. It also means that we're very consistent in the way that we approach the permitting, and that means that we're consistent both spatially, i.e. we will apply the same rules across the whole of England and Wales, but we're also consistent temporally, i.e. we know why we have made a decision because we're able to store our data and the reason for the decision and then go back to it later. It reduces the chances of legal challenge to our decision making because we are more consistent, and that reduces costs on everybody. This is a typical, what you see here is a typical output from that EasyMap screening tool. The green means that a local officer doesn't need to do any further investigation or consider that particular aspect of the environment. The red bits mean that we have to consider any action plans for species protection. The first line, for example, is protection for the water vole, and is looking at how sensitive it is. It refers to the schedules of legislation that we need to take account of, and it also indicates what action our permitting officer needs to take before issuing a permit. I've actually done a lot of permitting early in my career, and I really wish that I'd had this tool available rather than having to remember every single piece of legislation and scrabble through lots of very worn out pieces of paper and Acts of Parliament. It's a massive improvement on where we were, big resource improvement. But we're not only responsible for environment management, we're also responsible for contributing to responses during national major incidents. The most obvious example of that would be flooding, and you'll have all seen pictures of the flooding from 2000, 2007, where we had very large rainfall. We're also responsible for contributing to responding to major incidents, releases into air, into water from, let's say, a major breach of a vessel on a chemical works, or oil storage, oil processing, for example. So we also use GIS and spatial data infrastructure in our incident response. Many years ago, we used to print out large maps, colour them in by hand, give them to one of our trusted member of staff who'd jump in a taxi and take them to the local incident control room. That was in the days before we had powerful GIS systems, which are now capable of quickly serving data and information to either our national incident room or maybe the local police incident room, so that they know what the impact is going to be of their, or where things are happening in the environment that we know about. So what information that we have on river levels, river flows, where we think the flooding has occurred. We can then, working with others in the local authority, we can integrate our data with their spatial data to advise the police on where it's probably best to evacuate householders. So we get specific people and environmental benefits from our use of GIS. So, I was asked to come up with a few statements, and so my statement at the end is that spatial data infrastructure and geographic information systems through Inspire have come of age. We now have the technology and the techniques to do so many more things than we could 10 years ago in order to help us do whatever we choose to do. That's no longer really the challenge. Everybody will tell me, well, Martin, ask me, well, Martin, how can you do this in the current economic climate? Well, I think spatial data infrastructure and GI is part of the answer to the challenge of doing more with less. I think that the present economic climate that we find ourselves in is an opportunity, and the challenge on us as a group of professionals on spatial data infrastructure is to rise to that challenge and demonstrate how GIS, Inspire and the use of spatial data infrastructures can really deliver more for less. Thank you.